There's a state in America with its own power grid, its own former navy, an economy bigger than almost every country on Earth, and a history as an actual independent, internationally recognized nation. It's bigger than France. One of its ranches is bigger than Rhode Island, and it's the only state that joined the United States by treaties as a sovereign republic. These are 50 Texas facts that prove the Lone Star State is basically still its own country. 1. Texas was a real independent country. The Republic of Texas existed from 1836 to 1845, with its own president, its own Congress, its own money, and embassies in places like London and Paris. 2. It even had its own navy, 4 ships, a navy for a republic most famous for cattle. 3. That's why the flag is the Lone Star. It was the flag of an independent nation before it was ever a state or Krieg. 4. 6 different national flags have flown over Texas: Spain, France, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, the Confederacy, and the United States. That's where Six Flags amusement parks got their name. It started in Texas. 5. Texas is the only state that entered the Union by treaty as a sovereign nation rather than being acquired as a territory. 6. And here's the wild legal leftover. The annexation agreement allows Texas to divide itself into as many as 5 separate states. It's never used it, but the option is sitting right there in the paperwork. 7. The popular myth says Texas has the legal right to secede. It doesn't. The Supreme Court settled that in 1869. The 5-state split is real. The secession clause is folklore. Texans tend to remember the version they like better. 8. The Texas state capitol in Austin is taller than the U.S. Capitol in Washington. That was not an accident. 9. Before the famous battle, the Alamo wasn't a fortress. It was a Spanish mission. About 200 defenders held it for 13 days against a vastly larger Mexican army. Remember, the Alamo became the rallying cry that won Texas its independence 6 weeks later. 10. Texas is bigger than France, bigger than Germany, bigger than Japan. At roughly 268,000 square miles, if Texas were a country, it would be among the 40 largest on Earth. 11. El Paso is closer to San Diego, California than it is to Houston. Driving across Texas on I-10 takes longer than driving across several European countries combined. 12. Texas is so wide it doesn't even fit in one time zone. El Paso runs on Mountain Time while the rest of the state is on Central. 13. Texas has 254 counties, the most of any state by far. One of them, Brewster County, is bigger than the entire state of Connecticut. 14. The King Ranch in South Texas covers about 825,000 acres, larger than the state of Rhode Island. One ranch, bigger than a state. 15. Padre Island is the longest barrier island in the world, about 113 miles of sand guarding the Texas coast. 16. Texas has only one natural lake, Caddo Lake, on the Louisiana border. Every other lake in Texas, all the thousands of them, are man-made reservoirs. Texans didn't like the geography, so they changed it. 17. Guadalupe Peak, the state's highest point, stands at 8,751 feet. Texas has real mountains, deserts, swamps, plains, beaches, and pine forests. It's not one landscape. It's about 5 countries' worth. 18. 3 of the 10 largest cities in America are in Texas: Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. 19. And the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport is so large it has its own zip code. Its footprint is bigger than the island of Manhattan. 20. If Texas were an independent country, its economy, well over $2 trillion, would rank among the 10 largest on Earth, ahead of nations like Canada, Russia, and South Korea. 21. Texas produces more oil than any other state, by such a margin that if it were a country, it would be one of the largest oil producers in the world on its own. 22. But here's the plot twist nobody expects. Texas is also the #1 wind power state in America. The oil capital quietly became the renewable energy capital too. 23. Texas is the only state in the continental U.S. with its own independent power grid, ERCOT. The reason? Staying disconnected from the other states means staying outside federal regulation. Even the electricity declared independence. 24. That independence has a price. When a 2021 winter storm hit, Texas couldn't import enough power from neighboring grids because it had spent decades making sure it wasn't connected to them. 25. Houston was the first word ever spoken on the moon because NASA's mission control has been in Texas since the 1960s. 126. Texas raises more cattle than any other state. The herd is counted in the millions, and the cowboy economy is still real, not just branding. 27. Amarillo sits on one of the largest helium reserves on the planet. For much of the 20th century, the U.S. government's entire strategic helium supply was stored in Texas. 28. Dr. Pepper was invented in Waco, Texas in 1885, making it older than Coca-Cola by 1 year. 29. The Katy Freeway in Houston is one of the widest highways in the world. Up to 26 lanes across, Texas saw traffic and responded with more Texas. 30. And the Port of Houston is one of the busiest ports in the United States. A city 50 miles inland built a channel to the sea and made itself a global trade hub by sheer stubbornness. 31. Don't mess with Texas, in the unofficial national motto. Started as a government anti-littering campaign in the 1980s. It worked so well it became the state's identity. 32. The Texas Pledge is real. School children pledge allegiance to the Texas flag every morning, right after the American one. Name another state that does that. 33. Texas high school football stadiums seat tens of thousands. Some hold more people than professional soccer stadiums in Europe for high school. 34. Austin's Congress Avenue Bridge hosts the largest urban bat colony in North America. Well over 1 million bats emerge every summer evening, and the city turned it into a tourist attraction. 35. Outside San Antonio, Bracken Cave holds the largest bat colony on Earth. Millions of Mexican free-tailed bats, one of the largest concentrations of mammals anywhere on the planet. 36. There's a Texas dialect of German. Real communities around Fredericksburg and New Braunfels spoke Texas German for generations after immigrants arrived in the 1800s, a dialect that exists nowhere else on Earth and is now nearly extinct. 37. Tex-Mex isn't Mexican food that crossed the border. It's a genuine homegrown cuisine invented by Tejano communities. Texas didn't adopt a food culture. It built one. 38. Houston is consistently ranked among the most ethnically diverse major cities in the United States. More than 140 languages are spoken there. The most stereotyped state contains America's melting pot. 39. So every spring, the state plants and protects highways full of bluebonnets, and the wildflower program exists partly thanks to Lady Bird Johnson, a Texan First Lady. 40. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is the largest rodeo in the world, drawing millions of visitors a year. It's basically a national festival for a nation that's technically a state. 41. The deadliest natural disaster in American history happened in Texas. The 1900 Galveston hurricane killed an estimated 8,000 people or more. Afterward, the city physically raised itself, lifting entire buildings and pumping in sand to elevate the ground. 42. Texas leads the nation in tornadoes, averaging more than 130 a year, the most of any state. 43. In the town of Marfa, mysterious glowing lights have appeared on the horizon for over a century. Scientists blame atmospheric refraction. Marfa blames nothing and sells the t-shirts. 44. Texas is now America's launch pad. Private rockets fly from Boca Chica on the Gulf Coast, meaning the road to Mars currently begins at the southern tip of Texas. 45. More land in Texas is privately owned than almost anywhere in America. Over 90% of the state is in private hands. Montana hides its land behind the government. Texas hid it behind fences. 46. Texas gains more new residents than any other state in raw numbers. Hundreds of thousands every year, many from California. The Republic is still recruiting. 47. The state has no personal income tax, one of the engines of that migration. 48. Texas grows more cotton than any other state, produces the most wind power, the most oil, the most cattle, and exports more goods than any other state in America. Not one crown, 5. 49. The phrase friendly is literally the meaning of the state's name. Texas comes from the Caddo word Tasha, meaning friends or allies. The most independent state in America is named after friendship. 50. So add it up. Its own grid, its own pledge, its own cuisine, its own dialect of German, an economy bigger than Russia's, a history as a sovereign nation, and a legal option to split into 5 states. Texas isn't acting like its own country. It just never fully stopped being one. So here's what I want to know. If Texas actually became its own country tomorrow, its own grid, its own economy, its own borders, would it thrive or would it collapse? Drop your answer in the comments. I look at every single one. And if you think Texas is an extreme state, wait until you see the one that geologically shouldn't exist at all. The ground literally dissolves. That video is right here. Subscribe if you want the next one. We're covering the European country running the most radical immigration policy on the continent, and the result is not what you'd expect.